So thank you, everyone. We're so glad that you're here. Our goal today is to learn how to navigate changes for our students, helping them feel like they don't have to just remain in the state of fear, but increase their flexibility and how they think and help to harness their resiliency that lies within them. So as we go through the slides today, we're hoping you can take some learning points. And if, again, there's any questions, we'll save about 10 minutes at the end for us to kind of go into that deeper. So tips for our meeting, just to make it successful, if you can please stay muted just to make sure there's no background noise. And then you can select speaker view so you can see my slides in a bigger font. You can send questions through the chat to Nathaniel Fernandez, or I think directly to hosts. And anything that doesn't get answered, we can always follow up in an email or even do a consult call if you have further questions that are specific to your student. And then our slides, I will go ahead and email it to everybody that registered. And if there's any other information that you need, again, I can attach that later on. So the goal for today's session is we want to first kind of spend some time just reflecting on what our students and what we have experienced in the last 2 years. I think it's important for us to name it, and then also for us to be able to define what resiliency is and how are we going to help our students define their own particular strengths. And we're going to review some skills and also go through a Word doc that if you wanted to do this exercise at home with your college students, you could do as well. So in our first slide, first spending those couple minutes, would love for input in the chat. I want us to just reflect, as family members, what has been the biggest loss for us, or maybe the biggest transition in the last 2 years that we've experienced because of COVID. I myself sent my son to college, and I think our biggest loss was just the milestone moments. We didn't get to have a graduation for his high school in person. It was just drive-through. And then even the dropping him off at college, it was like away from the sidewalk. I didn't really get to walk in or do any events. So that was a loss, and I think it, in a sense, brings up grief because you don't ever get that back, those opportunities that we had longed for or had hoped would happen. So I don't know if anyone wants to share in the chat to everybody, just to kind of name what similar experiences others may have, or emotions, or even experiences that our own students may have experienced in the last 2 years. So some of the losses that our students did experience, again, was like a loss of their routine. Did it come up here? Sorry, my notes went away. And those needing to adapt quickly when everything went online, and kind of losing out on some of those experiences, whether it was high school or in that first year of college, if we're talking to any of our students that are transfer students. And then some of us struggled with just the social skills around physical distancing that led to many of them feeling isolated. So in that transition, we may notice some of our students struggling to make relationships, or kind of questioning like what are appropriate boundaries, because for so long they've just communicated like virtually. Then there's also been the loss of work, so there'll be some increased financial stress, or even just a sense of uncertainty because of maybe family members losing work, that students may feel at times overwhelmed when it comes to how to finance their college education. There's also been an increase in anxiety related to just having COVID, getting COVID, and even though we are going to be all back in person, there's still this sense of, will things, surge again? Well, we'll have to adapt, and things might change again. So our first skill is recognizing how did our students adapt, right? So we all went into this hunker down stage in March of 2020, and now here we are, August 2022. What did they do? Most of our students would have needed to have turned inward to reflect on their own individual needs and abilities. They needed to learn, and most of them hopefully did, how to be flexible in the ever-changing environment. And then they recognized what individual supports they needed. So hopefully, even in the sense of maybe the experiences they may have failed in or where they have struggled, I think it highlights, okay, how can we reinforce this need so that going into this transition into college, they can be successful? And hopefully we practice acceptance of things we couldn't control, and then hopefully focused our attention on the things that we could control. as those are ways to minimize stress during times of uncertainty. And now when we think about resilience, the Oxford Dictionary defines it as the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties and someone's sense of toughness. So when you think about all that we've done in the last 2 years, we had to use our mental energy to monitor our physical health, our emotional health, our family's well-being, while also maintaining our focus in college and sustaining motivation during times of great uncertainty. So this has allowed us to grow new muscles emotionally. And so now is the time to hone in on those strengths and harness our resilience. So again, assessing what has impacted your student the most during this time, and then recognizing again what they need. So if they have experienced grief, if there has been a specific loss in your family or a friend, we want to make sure that they're giving space to identify those feelings, to talk about that, and also recognizing that their personal experience may be different from someone. So if they're coming in to live with a roommate and maybe the roommate has experienced a loss from COVID, there might be this increased anxiety about sharing a space with someone and adapting to one another's living styles. So you also want to help your student be mindful of how someone else's reaction may be different to the experience of living on campus together. For some students, there may have been a sense of loss with their learning needs. If everything was virtual, during a time of transition, they may struggle when it comes to being in person or in class, and they may need to really advocate for themselves with their professors or even access support from our accessibility and disability office to have some accommodations if that is something that will help them succeed. And again, I think it's helping normalize that for some of us, there has been that job loss and financial instability of encouraging our students to recognize what's within our budget. What are ways that they can contribute? That can they get an on-campus job? Can they get a work-study job? Because I know sometimes in working with my students, they feel so fearful to ask their parents or family members for help, they won't eat. And they'll, be kind of struggling in that area. And so we want to make sure they're recognizing that we want them to have access to food so we can help them connect to a food bank. Or if there's some more ongoing needs of talking about financial situations, how can they connect to our financial aid office before it becomes a bigger issue? So one competence of individuals who are resilient are ones that do reach out for help when it's needed. Now that we've taken an inventory on what we lost during the beginning of COVID, that can become our guide on what we need to cultivate now, whether it's our support system, increased academic support, spiritual mentoring, financial literacy, academic coaching, mental health treatment, or personal accountability. So what is psychological resilience? It is defined as an individual's tendency to cope with stress and adversity. And some of the common factors that contribute to resilience are things that maybe as young adults, it's beyond their control, but just as an awareness. Those who are born with good health and an easy temperament, those who have a secure attachment and basic trust in other people, those that have interpersonal competence, including the ability to recruit help, those that have cognitive competence that encompasses the ability to read, capacity to plan, self-efficacy, and intelligence. Emotional competence, including diverse emotional skills, such as the ability to regulate one's emotions, delay gratification, maintain realistically high self-esteem, and employ creativity and humor to one's benefit. Also, the ability and opportunity to contribute to others, and holding faith that your life matters and life has meaning, including a moral sense of connection to others. So as we heard those competencies, hopefully we see that as our students prepare for college, these are some of the skills they already have. They've already demonstrated, right, the competency to read, plan, have self-efficacy, because it took that to apply to college, prepare themselves and, think about higher education. So it's reinforcing the traits that you see in your student, helping them to see what they possess, helping them to see how they can continue to grow in their skills, and recognizing that during times of adversity, how can they still lean in on those skills? So to illustrate this, I'll give you an example. Say a student who is continuing at APU receives their financial aid award letter and it's significantly less than this past year. If they're working out of their negative thoughts, they might think immediately, catastrophizing, great, I have to drop out of APU, I just can't afford to pay this. But when we start to slow down and notice, okay, you have these traits of self-efficacy and intelligence when you engage in your resilience, so what can you focus on? So maybe how do you get more information? Setting up an appointment with the financial aid counselor to determine what was the difference, what happened to my financial aid award letter last year and what has changed. Recognizing, are they using their full federal aid to the maximum? Do they have the ability to do work study, and can they use the full 20 hours at where they're set up, or is there a way to have more than one work study job? And then even thinking, are there expenses at APU that they can decrease? Some students sign up for APU health insurance, but there's alternatives. If they need to sign up for Covered California, that might be a cheaper way to get a health plan. Or discussing easier ways to do meal planning or your living expenses, if there's a way to reduce that. And so we want to help our students engage in that problem solving, but to get to that place, they have to start to catch themselves and recognize, am I catastrophizing? Am I thinking about the worst case situation? And so how do I start to slow down so that I can really use my insight? Oops. Did it go forward? Okay. Explore our strengths. So one of the skills that we worked on in the workshop yesterday with the students is just really recognizing what their strength is. So it's hard to find out what your strengths are when you're thinking about an activity that's hard for you to do. So one of the questions you may ask your student is, what's one thing you do every day because you really want to do it? So in an article that I'll share with you also afterwards, the therapist works with a client who really struggles at work, but he in this exercise says that he's a video blogger and he posts a video blog every day. So the therapist kind of talks to him through that, like what helps him persist to do the video blog even when he doesn't want to. And he thinks, well, I know people are expecting me and I don't want to let people down. It allows me to be creative in showing people how to play these different video games. So sometimes we need to help a student recognize, like, okay, those are strengths that you can then use when you're at work. And if your project doesn't go well, how can you recognize, okay, how can I reach out for help? How can I use creativity to maybe do this in a way that makes this more meaningful? So we try to find the skills that are transferable, starting by first identifying what your own individual students' strengths are. And so as we will continue to work on that, I also want us to recognize what are ways that we can help them cope with stress in that situation if they are feeling like overwhelmed by something. So as parents, you can help your student with recognizing their needs, rethinking how they can come to a place of acceptance with continuing to adapt as things may change in life, to reflect on how they are coping and integrate mindfulness skills, and be able to reach out for help as needed. So we're going to break apart each of those steps. So the first one is just to recognize. So an exercise you can do during this time with your student is just have them write down, what are they most worried about in starting college? Maybe for one of them, it's, will I have any friends? And so being able to have them talk about that, normalize it, that it's okay to feel, will I be alone? That's a natural feeling. They may feel anxious, fearful, or worried about this transition. And then even thinking, is there ways in which the pandemic has affected them that still is something that they're carrying on? And then so we want them to help them recognize, okay, what will help you in this transition? Will it be helpful to create a structure for your day that even if for whatever reason, you are exposed to COVID or someone in your classes, and you have to adapt to quickly going online, what are things that you can structure in your day that keeps you consistent no matter what? So help them focus on what they can have control over. So for those of your students that are living on campus, would it help to still have a weekly Zoom meeting with a family check-in or doing FaceTime? Are there ways in which you can still have a sense of belonging to your home community, watching the service of your home church online together? Or is it helpful to send monthly care packages to your student? Setting up time for them to put in their schedule safe physical activities of walking, running, riding bikes, hiking. Or are there ways even now they can kind of explore groups on campus that they can connect to? Like if any of your students are identify as a student of color, we have different student of color organizations that maybe you can already help them send that first email out to the group leader to just say, hey, I'm interested in learning more. And again, if we do have students that are continuing to grieve, we want them to have that sense of communicating that loss. We still want to engage with them on what are the strengths they gained during this past time of coping with the ongoing uncertainty, and how can they keep using those skills in this transition. And so again, just creating that space to talk about what they feel that they may need to succeed in the fall. Sometimes for our students, we want them to help them see that it's not all or nothing. They can hold both feelings. Like they can feel, expand this, that yes, they are grateful, but they also feel disappointed if things don't go their way. They can feel happy about that extra time they spent with family, but they can also feel overwhelmed by having been at home during times when they needed to be at home. They can feel hopeful, but they can also feel like at times maybe not everything's going to go perfectly, so it may feel like things are falling apart. And we can be a source of support for others, but we can also prioritize our own needs, and how do we make sure that we're filling our own, a cup up before we start filling up everyone else's. So during this time, I know there's about 3 weeks left before school starts, it might be a good time to just ask what would be helpful for them to know before they leave. Something as simple as like, hey, let's go through a YouTube cooking thing and let's learn how to cook a healthy meal. So on times in which you have limited time, you know that you have this healthy meal that you can eat. Also being able, again, to connect with others during this time. It might be nice to, to reach out to older family members that if something were to change with the pandemic or with COVID, that they may not be able to see. Could we write a letter to a loved one? I know a lot of families have, been able to connect, even more easily with Zoom. Would it be nice to have like that Zoom goodbye party for your student before they start school? And are there ways in which maybe your college student has been serving in their local church that maybe they would want to help find a more closer church to the APU campus if they are going to live there, where they can continue to serve, continue to be a part of ministry? Or if volunteering is an important part of them, how can they get connected to our groups on campus to find ways of creating service in the community? And again, I think as parents, our first skill that we can always do is just listen, validate your students' struggles, help them recognize ways they have successfully navigated difficult seasons in the past, and encourage them and highlight their strengths. Help them see difficult seasons as challenges to overcome rather than difficulties to run from. Remind them of their meaning, their purpose, and their goals that they're excited for. And also help them recognize ways they can slow down and implement self-care, such as journaling, exercise, and prayer. Remind them of their social supports and their friends back home, family, and their community as they find their place of belonging on campus. Like, how do they balance both, right? How do they still cultivate their friendships back home, but how do they start to connect maybe more deeper with one or two friends? During this time, we also want to help students just rethink. Again, when things don't go their way, are there ways in which they can rethink the situation? I think with the changes of COVID and the pandemic, one of the challenges that came up a lot in counseling last year was just interpersonal difficulties getting along with their roommate. And their first immediate response is like, I just need to move. And so we really need to help our students feel empowered to how do we work through conflict? How do we work through stress? Because there might not be the ability to just switch a room. And so kind of recognizing how do we rethink when a problem comes up, other ways to solve it, because we're limited in that, right? If we were at home for a year and a half, we're kind of protected from having these difficulties, and now we're going to navigate them for the first time. So how are they connecting with others? How are they reaching out for support? And how are they communicating with others what they need? And then I think another important skill is how do we help our students reflect? Sometimes even the sense of just creating a sense of stillness, of reflection, can be a way to have clarity of mind. So taking time for your mind and body to catch up with everything that is going on. So research shows that incorporating 5 to 10 minutes of mindfulness exercises can help decrease stress. So I'll definitely guide you to our University Counseling Center webpage, where we have some recordings of some guided meditations that even as parents we can listen to model for our students how to cope with stress. And in this slide, again, when I sent it as a PDF afterwards, there's links to a breathing exercise, a 10-minute meditation, and then just a journaling exercise to kind of just reflect again on the impact of living through a time of COVID, the pandemic, and kind of adapting to life again afterwards. So journaling is a really powerful tool, as it can help our students connect with their emotions and give them space to reflect on what they're experiencing. In that exercise that will be linked, it helps them to think about how do you move outside of themselves and into the community, and recognize again that they're not the only one going through this, but others, all young adults are going through this experience at the same time. And then it also has links to other trusted sites if they are wanting more information on just the ongoing changes of COVID. And again, you want to just help your students understand that their part is going to continue to stay safe, will help flatten this curve. But again, our goal is that they will be having a good in-person experience at college and be able to benefit from those social activities. So when we go back to helping our students recognize what their strengths in this article, I'm going to go ahead and share it in the chat. So this will be again, a worksheet if they're open to engaging with you in this conversation that kind of helps them really think about these things and have a plan of action before school starts. So in the step 1 is to help them search for their strengths, whatever they may be. Step 2 is to identify an obstacle that they may face. And then step 3, ask yourself, how can I use my character strength to navigate this obstacle? And then you want to put your strength to work and be able to use this plan. And then you review what worked and what may need to change. So one thing we can let our students know is that change is a constant in life. So nothing gives us immunity from it. Resilience is the capacity to adapt to negative change and recover from it as quickly as possible. We often don't need help to recover from positive change, right? So if they got hired for that job that they applied for, if they were selected as a scholarship recipient, or if they were approved for that private loan to pay college expenses, then that's all great because those are good changes. But it's the hard things in life that resiliency can help us process, respond, and act. And that has huge implications of where our story will go. Will we succumb to it or surmount it? This is where our belief system kicks in, and this is where using tools of overcoming negative thoughts can help us get unstuck during challenging times. So again, reviewing these steps with your student can be helpful because it helps them recognize it now when things aren't stressful, and then they can use it when a stressful situation comes up. For some of us, a lasting impact of COVID is that even past trauma symptoms may have resurfaced. And this is where we may need to tell our mind that we will succeed in spite of life's difficulties. But it's also important for them to recognize if times of transition are difficult, if kind of changing in this life into being a college student is difficult, that it's okay to ask for help. And so we'll definitely talk about that as an option as well. So one of the things as students that we can help our students recognize is, do they struggle from this sense of having these negative thoughts? Do they put like unnecessary demands on themselves where they feel like everything has to go perfectly, and if it doesn't, then it's not going to be okay? Are they often comparing themselves to how others see them or how they feel others are doing, and then therefore feel like they're not good enough? Do they struggle with frustration and tolerance? And what that looks like is having an inability to cope with stress in the moment, where they get, they come out of their window of tolerance really quickly. And are they prone to catastrophizing, which again is thinking that worst case situation as soon as you hear bad news? So So often we do have automatic thoughts, and if left unchallenged, some can leave us feeling overwhelmed, not good enough, or even feeling that if one thing goes wrong, everything is going to go wrong. So these thinking errors are what we call cognitive distortions. They are unhelpful thinking patterns we have learned over time. So what do we mean by irrational thinking? An irrational idea or belief is something where you distort reality, it's illogical, it prevents you from reaching your goals, leads to unhealthy emotions, leads to self-defeating behavior. And so these are ones in which we can help our students recognize, okay, like, hey, that's that negative thought that comes up. How can we start to challenge that and hopefully replace that? Did I go to the? Okay, so the four thinking habits that foster resilience is when we start to change even our language, right? Instead of I have to, you can say I prefer. Being able to have unconditional self or other acceptance, which means like even when things are challenging, I'm going to choose to accept that this is just a challenging time for my life and I'm not going to fight against it, not create that tension. Recognizing, okay, how do I develop frustration tolerance? How can I start to ground myself in the moment when I start to feel overwhelmed? And how do I start recognizing that I need to decatastrophize, right? So when I think a situation is unsolvable, how do I start to say like, okay, well, what can I do in this moment? What skills can I use to overcome this? So we can develop healthy attitudes and expectations by seeing what our values are and how we move forward through adversity, honoring what we value and disputing unhealthy beliefs. We can practice self-acceptance and lean into our emotions and practice coping skills, deep breathing, journaling, engaging in an activity that creates an opposite of emotion of what we are feeling. So often our students struggle with procrastination on a class assignment. So in that moment, instead of feeling that dread, oh, I have to do this and I don't want to do it, is there something in that moment that they can do that they know that they're able to do? Can I make myself a cup of coffee? Can I put my favorite playlist on music and actually put a load of laundry to wash? Like what is something that can get them out of that feeling of being stuck? And if we know that our students are prone to thinking the worst in every situation, how can we help them practice now, interrupting that all or nothing thinking and ask, if one of them has the experience of like, I failed this test, I'm going to fail this course, recognizing, okay, I may have this thought, but how many times have I actually, failed a class before, failed a course? Because sometimes even just quantifying that experience can help our students feel less anxious that this is really going to happen. Again, we want to debunk that negative thinking. And so we can also look at how our worldview impacts our thinking and coping. So when we think about resilience, another term that comes up is grit. So grit and resilience. Another psychologist who's written on this is Dr. Angela Duckworth. And so this is a good book. Again, if when our students are good at reading and they're open to this, this is a book you can get on Amazon Prime. But it really helps you to really recognize times in your life when you have had a goal, maybe experience a challenge or setback along the way, but you still were able to strive and persist. And then helping people recognize what helped them get through it, what helped them be better at the situation. So one of the highlights of the book that Dr. Angela Duckworth talks about is that she conducted a study with 1,200 West Point cadets who were subjected to an intensive 7-week training program, often called BEAST. What she found is that the greatest predictor of success in the summer training program was not the SAT score, the high school rank, the leadership experience, or athletic ability, but rather grit. So from this, we can conclude that grit and resilience are important drivers of success. Also, grit is not luck and it's not based on talent, but one's courage and passion to persevere even when things are difficult. So again, when we just kind of use the word grit, even using that as a way of having an acronym. So G stands for that growth. How likely are we to go seek fresh ideas? Perspectives, inputs, and new ideas. And college is a perfect time to do that. College is a perfect time for a student to recognize like, okay, I might fail at this, but this also is going to help me grow in my own personal character. How can I increase my resilience? So it's about bouncing back from adversity and being able to use the adversity to move forward. I stands for instinct. Instinct is about going about after our goals the best way we can. So not the hardest way, but what's the best way? And T stands for that tenacity, that perseverance, persistence. Never say die, never quit dimension of grit. And so again, these are tools that we can help our student use right now by even just recognizing, okay, how do I develop this? I might not have it, but how can I practice this right now? So when we think about how to build resilience, I want us to highlight the 4 A's. The first one being awareness. So helping our students just be aware in a time of stress, what is going on in their body and in their brain? Where do they feel the tension? What are they feeling? Because our emotions contain data. So notice what they're telling you about the situation and yourself. What can you do to increase your awareness? So awareness is a critical first step towards mindful action. And then we move into acceptance. We want to just accept the way you feel is the way you feel, and that's okay. So emotions are a part of our natural response to experience. If you start judging yourself, example, like I should be feeling this or I shouldn't be feeling this, that's going to leave us stuck. So we want to explore where are these thoughts coming from, and then how can we just let them go? So again, we want to accept the situation and what you can and can't control. The third one is adjustment. So after acceptance comes choice. What adjustments can you make to improve the situation? How can you shift your body, energy, and thinking? What negative self-talk may have contributed to the situation? And what positive beliefs are more helpful and accurate now? And then our last A is action, right? What's our plan of action that we're going to take? We want to take action and do something, but we want to do it consciously and intentionally. So we want to use our emotional awareness, even if your choice is not to act immediately. You want to consider the last time you were in a state of indecisiveness. How did you feel the moment you made a decision and took action? And what positive changes happened as a result? We also want to help our students recognizing that it's okay to fail. We have all failed, and learning how to fail kind of gets that pressure off of us that we don't have to be perfect. So it is in failure that we learn how to succeed. So you ask the greatest athletes, the most well-known inventors, the celebrities that have risen to high acclaim, and they will tell you that the successes that they are known for only came about because of their willingness to persist through failure. So sharing failure is a way to create a culture of normalizing the experience. So even if we create that culture at home, it's okay to say like, wow, I messed up today, and normalize that for our students. And so in the student presentation yesterday, we had a great reflection from our director of TRIO, who shared that, students have come in and really struggled with having gotten a poor grade on one test and feeling like I have to just drop this course. I'm not going to be able to do this. And as they were able to talk through it, and then they got encouragement to reach out to the professor told them, yes, you did score poorly, but you're doing really well in this course. This is just a tough course. So it's really helping our students recognize that like a poor grade doesn't define them. It is an ability to say, okay, how can I ask for feedback, or how can I get some more help in this area because I'm struggling to learn the way in which the professor wants me to learn. But it's not a failure, and so we don't want them to give up. So again, when we're wanting to inspire grit and resiliency, we want to focus on the language choices. So again, when you praise someone for a characteristic or strength, it teaches people that there's a fixed mindset. So like, you are really smart, or you are so flexible. But if we praise our students for the effort or strategy, that fosters resilience. So for instance, if our student did get a poor grade and they say, you know what, I went to talk to my academic counselor to kind of get some feedback, be like, you know what, you're doing so great in reaching out for support, or thank you for being honest about how you're feeling. We want to praise what are their action steps that they're doing, what is the way in which they're trying to still navigate this. Because sometimes if we do just focus on saying you're smart, there's a sense of like, okay, well then maybe I'm not smart enough because I didn't, get an A in this course. The next tool is to surround yourself with positive people. So hopefully they're cultivating relationships with students that are going to be lifting them up during this time. So we also want to create an environment at home where there's positive thinking and growth. So a growth mindset is the norm. When you do, you'll begin to see for your students that everything in life, there's ways in which you can get support to move you towards the way you want to go. But also when you're around people that are constantly negative, it can bring you down. So you just want to help your student kind of be aware of the environments that they're in and how can they connect to those that can lift them up during this time. We want to help them adopt flexible thinking patterns. Becoming less rigid in your thoughts and actions allows resilience and grit to blossom simply because flexible people don't see problems. They see opportunities for growth and learning. When every challenge is met with creative thinking, you see yourself as being capable, and this confidence breeds more resilience. We also want to help our students set goals that align with their purpose. So people with a sense of purpose are happier. So purpose can seem like a hard to define goal, but creating smaller goals along the pathway to your larger purpose. So maybe if they're undecided, it's like, okay, are you taking some classes to kind of get your exposure to psychology or to a science? And how are you maybe going to like after class events on lectures or activities on campus that can kind of stimulate your learning in different ways. You also want to build time for students to build time in their day of reflection, of being able to take time to reflect, bring awareness to the things they accomplished and the path that they want to take. And again, whether the reflection takes the form of a meditation, a journaling session, or a walk outside, when your student gives themselves time to assess their accomplishments in a non-judgmental way, it allows them to adjust their actions accordingly. Again, when we see that our students are struggling, even after our interventions with them, we want to help them to reach out. So even right now during the summer, our University Counseling Center is offering solution sessions via telehealth or even in person. Our Student Health Center is available if there's any needs as well. If as parents we feel concerned about our students, there's also a way to go online and fill out a CARES report. Like if your student lives on campus and you want someone to check in on them, there's a way to facilitate a referral online that goes to our CARES team, which is run by our Dean of Wellness in situations where students may be going through a family loss, an emergency, or just struggling so that others can connect with them and reach out to them. And then here's our Student Health Center phone number. And then when you're thinking about at what point should a student reach out to help for us, I think at any time when you see that their anxiety is getting to the point where they're not able to go to class, where they're avoiding all social gatherings. Again, you can't make an appointment directly for your student, but you can encourage them to make that call and we can make that appointment for them. Again, ways in which they would want to know that they should seek support if they're not able to take care of themselves, if you're seeing that they're not eating, not showering, if they find themselves preoccupied with concerns, if they're often telling you that they're overwhelmed. And anytime when they're at a danger of hurting themselves or others that would be imminent risk, you would definitely want to call 911, but definitely alert us as, again, we do have crisis support and we can see students the same day, Monday through Friday. If you call our office and press 2, you can be connected to our after-hour phone support, and that's called Protocol, and that is run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So just to have a physical picture, we're located in Magnolia Court next to the Student Health Center, just past the baseball field on East Campus. The different services that are available is we do have urgent care, we have group services. So if you're feeling like your student could benefit from some more resiliency building skills, we have a workshop that's a one-time commitment called Learning to Thrive During Difficult Times that they can give us a call and set up an appointment to be assessed to be a part of that workshop. We also have a women's support group. We have a student of color group, and we have a boundaries group that we run each semester. We also do individual therapy, couples therapy, premarital counseling, once our students are at that stage. And we do run brief treatment model. So if your student needs more longer term counseling, they can start with us first, and then we can also help them connect to a provider in the community if they need more of the ongoing services, like every week ongoing. So that is something we can help them connect to. So how they make an appointment is they can go through their My Cougar portal and complete online paperwork. Then they can give us a call and schedule that first appointment, or they can just walk in. And we are able to do telehealth again if needed. If not, we are doing in-person services. And when they meet with their counselor for an intake appointment, that's when they'll come up with treatment goals and come up with a treatment plan of how often they'll meet and for how many sessions. And so before we talk about our campus resources, I want to just have Nathaniel kind of share about another prevention workshop that students can be engaged in during this time.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Patricia. Thank you all of those of you that are engaging in the chat as well. I'm getting to all of the questions as they come. But we're going to be offering many more classes under what we're calling our Cougars Care umbrella. We're going to be doing those from middle of October all the way up to Thanksgiving. So anybody that is interested in learning more about maybe managing their stress or depression, or learning how to become a better listener, or learning better time management and goal setting skills, we're going to be having classes on that, and we'd love to invite your students to join. So you could encourage them to reach out to the counseling center, and we will send them an email with all of the information. So I think they're great. I happen to run them, so I am biased, but I do think they're great, and we really get reviews from students.
Thank you, Nathaniel, for sharing about that resource. Some other additional campus resources, we have our Office of Campus Ministry. They provide pastoral counseling for students. So you can email the office if the student wants to set up an appointment. If your student does have a learning need, or if their mental health symptoms do impact their learning needs, they can contact our Office of Accessibility and Disability Resources to set up accommodations. And that's run with our director, Carmen Varela. And then we also have our Student Center for Reconciliation and Diversity, which manages our programming for students of color and also for our international students as well. And the director there is Aaron Hinojosa. And so if you have questions, you can also reach out to him as well, or encourage your student to learn more about their services. And so want to kind of just open it up. Thank you so much for being an active audience listening, but would love to hear any questions or any feedback that you all have.